My name is Victoria. I'm 44 years old, and I work as a massage therapist at a mid-tier spa in a quiet suburb. My fingers know the ache behind a shoulder blade before my clients even speak, and I've learned over the years how to unlock tension without saying a word. But some knots lie deeper than the skin can reveal, some settle in the soul. And lately, I've felt one growing inside me. At home, things have fallen into silence. My husband, Peter, is 57 now. He used to be energetic. He loved his job, his hobbies, our weekend hikes. But that man faded slowly over the years. Now he stays home, most days in a tattered robe, flipping through channels with a glass of soda in his hand. We barely talk. Even our bedroom, the one place that once sparked with urgency and laughter, has become a hollow chamber of routine. We lie beside each other, but our bodies have forgotten how to reach across that space. And I don't even flinch anymore when he rolls over and snores with his back to me. I suppose people would say it's just marriage, that after 2 decades the fire naturally fades. But I've felt it, deep down, that we've become strangers in matching pajamas. No touches, no questions. Just obligations. My son, Marcus, is 24. He still lives with us, which I used to be grateful for. He helps out, pays rent, and keeps to himself. But in the past year, something has shifted with him too. He spends nearly every waking moment in front of his computer in the home office. Not gaming, consulting. Marcus is a psychologist, and from what I understand, he specializes in online therapy sessions. He listens to people's problems all day, but barely speaks to us at dinner. Sometimes I catch him staring out the window during his breaks, eyes distant. He always had a quiet mind, a sharp way of seeing through people. As a boy, he used to ask questions that startled adults, questions that pierced the truth before they were ready to hear it. I admired that in him. Still do. But he's always alone. No girls. No boys either, as far as I can tell. I'd be fine with either. Love is love. But it's the absence of any romantic connection that concerns me. No flings. No awkward introductions. No heartbreaks. Nothing. Just long hours at his desk, a few muttered words over dinner, and calls I sometimes overhear, with a male voice on the other end that sounds more than casual. I don't ask questions. He's an adult. I have no right to interrogate him. Still, my mind spins. What if he's just waiting? For something? For someone? One evening, I stood in the hallway, just outside his office. The door was cracked slightly, and I could see the soft blue glow from his screen lighting up his face. His expression was focused, intense. He was speaking gently, hands folded under his chin. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the way his eyes softened when the person on the other end spoke. When I walked back to my bedroom, I felt something strange, something that made me sit on the edge of the bed in the dark. Jealousy. Not of the person on the call, no. Jealous of his focus, his warmth, of the fact that someone else was getting the side of him I used to see every day. That's when it began. Not a plan, not exactly, but a quiet curiosity. Could I still get his attention? Could I reach him? Not as a mother, not with rules or concerns, but as a woman? That night, I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. I saw the faint lines near my eyes, the tiredness in my mouth, the skin on my neck beginning to loosen. I had aged, but not ungracefully. There was still shape to my waist, softness to my shoulders. I leaned forward and studied my reflection. And then I made a choice. I would start small. The next morning, I wore perfume to breakfast, something I hadn't done in months. Not the calming sandalwood I usually wore to the spa. No, this one was sharper, amber, jasmine musk. I let my hair down over one shoulder and wore a silk robe that clung more than it hid. He came into the kitchen, bleary-eyed, in his usual black hoodie and joggers. "Morning," he said, reaching for the kettle. "Good morning," I replied, pouring coffee into his favorite mug. His eyes flickered. Just for a second. Downward. Then back to my face. "You going somewhere?" he asked.
"No.
Just felt like dressing up a little." He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The following day, I wore a backless top and yoga pants that framed my shape without apology. I leaned across the counter while making toast, conscious of his presence behind me. He didn't say a word, but I caught him watching in the window's reflection. His eyes weren't wide, just still, observing. On the third day, I brushed past him in the hallway, my hand grazing his arm. "Oops, sorry," I said, smiling. He nodded, but I heard it, the breath he drew in, deeper than usual. It wasn't much. A flicker, a pause, the lingering of his gaze. But it was enough to make my heart skip. Something had begun, and I wasn't sure if I was frightened or thrilled. The small changes became part of my days. A little more perfume, softer lighting in the kitchen, lingering glances that held longer than they should. Marcus never commented directly, but I knew he noticed. The shift in his posture when I entered the room. The way his voice lowered just slightly when he answered my questions. He never pulled away, never recoiled. That said more than words. But I needed more. He spent nearly all day in that home office. 10 hours sometimes. Listening to others. Helping them through their struggles. Giving his voice, his thoughts, his time to people who would log off and never think of him again. I started listening for the tone he used near the end of a session, when his voice would soften, his words turn to gentle affirmations. And when I heard the pause, the telltale silence before he clicked to disconnect, I knew his walls were down, if only for a moment. That's when I decided it was time to try something new. I spent that afternoon in the kitchen, not cooking for dinner but for him. I pulled out the good cocoa, the softest dark chocolate, real vanilla extract, the things I saved for special occasions. I baked a dense, warm chocolate cake, the kind that melts the moment your spoon touches it. I whipped cream by hand, just the way he likes it, folding in a dash of cinnamon. I even dusted it all with a hint of powdered sugar, just to make it look cared for. When it was done, I plated it on a dish I hadn't used in years, the one I usually reserved for guests. Then I changed. Not into something loud or gaudy. No, I chose something quiet, something elegant. A long, dark green silk dress with thin straps and a subtle shimmer that caught the light. It clung just enough, the fabric hugging the shape of me with grace. I kept my hair down, brushed until it framed my face. And then, barefoot, I carried the plate down the hallway toward his room. The door was slightly open. His office was dim, the glow of his screen reflecting in his glasses. He sat there, rubbing the bridge of his nose, the exhaustion clear in the way his shoulders slumped. The weight of other people's problems rested heavily on him, and for a moment, I didn't see my son. I saw a man who gave everything and asked for nothing. I knocked lightly on the doorframe. He looked up, startled, then blinked. "Hey," I said softly. "You're done with your sessions for the day?" Yeah," he replied, his voice lower than usual. "Last one just ended." "I thought so." I stepped inside slowly. "I made you something." I placed the plate down on the edge of his desk. The scent of chocolate filled the small room, rich and warm. His eyes went to the dessert, then to me. I watched his gaze shift, from the cake to my dress to my eyes. He didn't speak, but something in his expression softened, curious, maybe uncertain. "I thought you deserved a little break," I said. "You've been locked in here all day." He gave a small smile. "It smells amazing." I leaned slightly against the edge of his desk, close enough for him to smell the faint trace of jasmine and skin cream on me. "And it's not just dessert," I added. "I thought I could take care of you a little tonight. Entertain you even." He blinked, a nervous laugh escaping him. "Entertain me?" I reached forward, brushing my fingers gently through his hair. The strands were warm and soft beneath my touch. He tensed, just slightly, but didn't move away. His eyes searched mine, and I saw it. Not discomfort. Not fear. Just a question he didn't know how to ask. "If you want to relax a little," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "just say." He stared at me for a long moment, his breathing slower now. The room felt suspended, time no longer mattered. There was just the glow of the monitor, the hum of the computer fan, and us. I moved behind him slowly, my fingers still in his hair, massaging gently at the base of his scalp. I felt him exhale, long, slow, like the tension had finally found a release. I know you don't like people fussing over you, I murmured, but sometimes it's okay to let someone care for you. He didn't speak. His hands relaxed on the arms of the chair, his body still. My touch was soft, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. I stroked behind his ear, down to his shoulder blades, and gently along the top of his spine. Slow, deliberate, never crossing a line, but standing right beside it. You carry so much, I whispered. More than you let on. His voice finally broke the silence, low and steady. Yeah, I guess I do. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Then let me carry something for you. Even just for tonight. He nodded slightly, and I felt his weight lean back against the chair. I picked up the fork and gently handed it to him, brushing his fingers as I did. Try the cake, I said. It's best when it's still warm. He took a bite. A slow, appreciative sigh escaped his lips, and I felt a flicker of warmth move through me. You always know what I need, he said, his eyes closing for a moment. I stood beside him, my hand gently stroking his hair once more. And in that quiet, hushed space, between the flickering monitor and the shadows on the wall, I felt something unfold. Not a plan, not a confession, just possibility. I stayed with him longer than I had planned. At first, I told myself it was just to make sure he enjoyed the dessert. That the moment would pass once he finished eating and I'd return to the kitchen, rinse the plate, and go back to being the woman I'd been for so long. Quiet, dutiful, invisible. But I didn't leave. Marcus leaned back in his chair, the last spoonful of cake resting untouched as he looked up at me. His eyes were softer now, like the sharpness he usually carried for the world had been dulled just enough to let me in. I saw something in him I hadn't seen in years, something vulnerable. Unprotected. Not the son who always had answers, but a man who maybe, just maybe, needed comfort. Needed me. You're quiet, he said, his voice low, almost coaxing. I smiled gently. I'm watching you. Why? Because I don't think anyone else does. Not the way you deserve. He looked away at that, down to his lap, where his hands were now loosely folded. There was something in the curve of his shoulders, in the way he exhaled, that let me know I had touched something real. You work all day, I said softly, stepping closer behind him again. Listening to people. Carrying their emotions. When do you ever let someone hold yours? He didn't answer, but his silence was its own kind of truth. I ran my fingers through his hair again, slower this time, more intentionally. I could feel his pulse in the soft spot just behind his ear. A steady beat. A rhythm I knew without even trying. You were always the strong one, I whispered. Even when you were little. You'd sit next to me, telling me about kids at school, teachers who didn't listen, friends who hurt you, and yet you never asked for anything. My fingers slid down the sides of his neck, massaging gently. His eyes fluttered closed. I'm not trying to fix you, I continued. I just want to be here. With you. Right now. He didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just sat there, breathing slowly. So I leaned in closer, my cheek almost brushing his. The heat from his skin, the scent of his cologne, so familiar, and yet suddenly charged. My voice dropped to a whisper. If you ever want to talk about anything, or if you just want to stop being strong for everyone else. I paused, letting the words hang between us. You don't have to say anything. Just look at me. That'll be enough. I moved to the side of his chair, sitting gently on the armrest. My dress flowed around my legs, the silk catching a faint shimmer from the desk light. He looked up at me, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in full. And there it was. That question again. Not spoken. Not even shaped into words. Just present. Alive in the air. I reached out, resting my hand lightly on his cheek. You're safe with me, I said. He closed his eyes again, as if absorbing that. And I let my hand remain there, unmoving. just the warmth of skin, the closeness of breath. But something had changed in that stillness. His fingers moved slowly until they rested on top of mine. Not gripping, not pulling, just resting. A mutual stillness.
A choice.
I don't know why this feels different, he whispered. It does for me too, I replied quietly. The space between us had shrunk, not in inches, but in understanding. In the trust he gave me by not pulling away. In the vulnerability I offered without asking anything in return. And yet, I felt a pressure building, delicate, but undeniable. A tension that no longer felt like confusion. It felt like a crossroad. And I knew the next move mattered more than anything before. So I leaned in, not to cross that line, but to acknowledge it. I kissed his forehead.
Soft.
Deliberate. The kind of kiss I hadn't given him in years. Not out of distance, but out of forgetting how close we used to be. When he was little, when I could hold him and make everything better. His hand tightened slightly over mine. I've missed this, he said, eyes still closed. What part? This feeling of being seen. I smiled, brushing a thumb across his cheek. Then let me remind you.
He didn't speak.
But I saw it in his eyes. Permission. Not for anything more than presence. Then connection. Then warmth. I stood slowly. My hand lingered against his shoulder. I'll be in the living room, I said. Come find me if you still want someone to take care of you. Then I left the room. Not in haste. Not in retreat. But in invitation. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because I felt him watching. And I knew this story, whatever it was becoming, was no longer mine alone. The living room was dim when I sat down, lit only by the amber flicker of the floor lamp in the corner. Outside, the sky had dipped into indigo, the moon casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. I had poured myself a glass of wine, just one, and let the soft music from the record player fill the silence. But my mind wasn't on the music. I was thinking of him. Of the way his hand had rested over mine. Of the way his eyes had searched my face, not with fear, but with something deeper. Something questioning. Open. Human. I sat curled at one end of the couch, my legs tucked beneath me, the green silk of my dress catching the dim light. I was still warm from his touch, and my chest felt heavy with anticipation, not of what might happen, but of what already had. The shift. The acknowledgement. The unraveling of years spent looking at each other through the lens of familiarity, of family, of habit. Now we were simply two people. Alone.
Honest.
Stripped of roles and expectations. And then I heard his footsteps. Not heavy. Not rushed. Just sure. He didn't say anything as he entered. He paused in the doorway for a moment. I looked up and our eyes locked again. That same quiet electricity passed between us, but this time, neither of us looked away. I patted the spot beside me. Come sit, I said gently. He crossed the room and lowered himself beside me, his body close but not yet touching. The space between us was a breath, a heartbeat. He looked down at his hands. I wasn't sure if I should, but you did. He gave a soft nod. I turned slightly toward him, studying his face. Even in the low light, I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his lips were slightly parted. His breath came slower now. You don't have to say anything, I whispered. You've said enough with your eyes.
He looked up at me then.
And I saw it all. The years of holding back, the depth he'd kept hidden beneath all that control. The loneliness. The ache for something simple and real. I've been alone in a room full of people, he said quietly. For years. Even with you and Dad. Even with clients. I listen to people all day, but nobody really listens to me. I reached out slowly, placing my hand on his cheek again, brushing a loose strand of hair from his forehead. I'm listening, I said. I've always wanted to. I just didn't know how to reach you. His hand rose and rested lightly over mine again. You're reaching me now, he said. My throat tightened at his words. I let my fingers slide to the nape of his neck, pulling him gently toward me. Not demanding, just inviting. And he came. Slowly, tentatively, like something inside him had waited for this moment without knowing it. His forehead pressed to mine. We stayed like that for a breathless eternity, eyes closed, breathing together, skin against skin. A silent promise. Is this okay? I asked softly. Yes, he whispered. It feels right, somehow. And then the silence broke. Not with words, but with a kiss. Soft at first, like an exhale against my lips. A tentative brush. A question. I responded gently, letting my mouth find his, my fingers threading into his hair, holding him close but not tight. The kiss deepened, not rushed, not urgent, but with the weight of everything we had never said. Every quiet dinner, every missed connection, every moment I had watched him drift further into himself, wishing I could anchor him. Now here we were, two souls rediscovering each other in the only language that couldn't be misunderstood. Touch, breath, nearness. When we finally pulled apart, I kept my forehead against his, our noses brushing, the air between us charged and warm. I don't know what this is, he murmured, but I don't want it to stop. Neither do I whispered back. The kiss wasn't a solution. It wasn't a destination. It was a beginning. And as we sat together in the quiet of that room, our hearts still catching up to what had just passed between us, I knew one thing for certain. We had crossed a line, but we hadn't fallen. We had stepped into something unknown, and neither of us wanted to go back.